To read Back to Reality, the best-selling novel of the Bestseller Experiment by the two Marks, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/back to reality.
And subscribe to this podcast to get loads of extra bonuses. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/subscribe.
Gareth, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
My absolute pleasure. I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for so long now. One, I love your books, and Macaque Attack is a classic of the genre, and I'm loving Embers of War as well, which is your new book. Do you want to tell us about that? How that? Because this is quite different from the Macaque Attack books. Tell us about Embers of War.
Embers of War basically is me returning to my first love, which is space opera. The first novel I published for Solaris back in 2011 was called The Recollection, and that was a full-on space opera with talking spaceships and ancient alien ruins and all that good stuff. I've kind of gone back to that here, but I've kind of, instead of taking a step back, I've tried to turn all the dials up to 11. It's a space opera, but it's told in the first person from the point of view of 5 different characters, one of whom is a spaceship. And it's basically the story of people who've been through this cataclysmic war, which happened 3 years ago, and they're now working together in a kind of interstellar rescue organization to help out ships in distress, to rescue failing colonies and so on. And so they've put aside their enmities from the past, and they're working together, and they're all trying to come to terms with what they've seen, what they've done, the people they were during the war. And it's very much their journey of processing everything that went on in the past, as they kind of learn to group together as an effective crew.
And it's fantastic stuff. Now, when you're writing something like this, how do you get under the skin of writing a spaceship? How do you put yourself in the shoes of a spaceship?
I think at one point the spaceship describes herself as a 14-year-old girl with all the social grace of a missile. And I do have sort of early teenage daughters, so I have the kind of the raw material right there. So, but it's also, I mean, she is her consciousness is based on a sort of cloned human brain tissue, augmented by computer. So in some ways she is kind of startlingly human, and in other ways she really isn't. So I found it quite an interesting experiment to kind of write somebody whose senses and sort of physical attributes are so removed from everyday human, but in some ways it actually does feel quite a kinship with humans.
Absolutely. And as you said before, this is kind of, you've gone back to your first love here. Has this been simmering away in the pot for some time? Are you someone who, drip feeds ideas into an ideas bucket, or did this come fully formed? How did it come about for you?
This one came about, I think I might have been in a dentist's waiting room. And I was flicking through a magazine, and there was an article about the Titanic and sort of great disasters in the golden age of ocean liners. And it was pointing out that the Titanic wasn't the first disaster, and it certainly wasn't the worst disaster. But it was the first one where the ship had radio. So it could send a distress call, and people could be rescued and tell their tale. Whereas before, ships would just leave Liverpool, and 3 months later, someone in New York would go, well, I guess it's not coming then. They would just sail off and never be seen again. So that kind of got me thinking that that's a bit like sort of in a sort of space context, sending generation ships or whatever out into the void, and then you'd never know what happened to them. And I was thinking, well, if you updated that to today, we'd have helicopters, we'd have Coast Guard planes, we'd have fast boats that could all go out to try and help.
Do you often find yourself getting inspiration in dentists and doctors' waiting rooms?
Anything to avoid thinking about why I'm there.
I have a couple of listener questions for you. First one is from Julian Barr. Simple question. He says, what inspired the macaque books?
Well, actually, it started life as a short story, which was published in Interzone way back in the day, 2006 or 2007. But when I was writing that short story, I needed a cartoon character because the main character's girlfriend was an online cartoonist. And I wanted a character that came alive and basically took over the world. And the original working title was the monkey that ate the internet. But so I look back through my notebooks, and I do play with words sometimes, or words kind of stick together in my head. And I've just written the phrase "ack macaque" because ack is a type of World War I anti-aircraft fire, and macaque. At the time, I thought it was a lemur kind of thing, but it turns out it's a monkey. And those two words just stuck together, and I wrote them down. So I was looking back through thinking, how am I going to make up a cartoon character? And there was Ack macaque, and I just thought, brilliant. An aircraft flying monkey. What more could you want?
Well, exactly. What more could one want? I mean, they are a fantastic read. I'm always interested when I hear that writers have developed a full-length novel, or in this case, a trilogy that started out as a short story. Now, short stories very often, they burn very brightly, but for a very short time. The ideas don't always necessarily, lend themselves to a full-length novel. But what was there in your original short story that made you think there's a longer story in this, there's more to tell?
Absolutely nothing. The trilogy of novels has nothing in common with the story at all, apart from the monkey character.
Right.
And even he's a little different in the trilogy. It came about that I sat down to write a murder mystery set on a Zeppelin, in which I had several characters who were sort of not quite human, because they'd had bits of their brain replaced or they were clones or whatever. And I needed a character who never had been human, but was thought like one. And I kind of rooted around in my subconscious, and there was the monkey smoking a cigar saying, well, it's about time. And he stepped in and completely took over the entire trilogy. So it bears no relation to the short story at all, apart from the monkey.
I mean, he is quite a distinct character. He is front and center. Do you find that with a character like that, did you have to do much backstory, or did he kind of arrive fully formed for you?
He completely arrived fully formed. I drop in, there are some hints of backstory, who he was before he became Ack macaque, what he's grown up like before he became intelligent and he was just a monkey. So there are some kind of nods to that, but it's mostly about him growing up rather than to where he's come from. But his entire personality and everything was just there from day one. It was a kind of mixture of John Belushi in 1941 and Hellboy. It just all crammed together, and probably all the Biggles books I read as a kid. And, he was there and he was up and running. Each one, basically. That's such a gift, isn't it? If that happens, because and particularly as he clearly had the legs for a trilogy. Will there be any more books in the series? Will you go back to that character and that universe? Solaris published the complete trilogy in a lovely paperback omnibus edition, which is huge and great for propping open doors. But for that, I contributed a whole brand new coda section.
Yes.
Of the final chapter of his life. So you can find out what actually becomes of him and the deeper truth behind everything by reading that final section. So for me, that's kind of closure on the character. I think I've taken him as far as I can take him, and I've told his story. He has an arc from beginning to end. So I have no plans to go back to that. But however, obviously, if a publisher comes along and piles briefcases full of money on my doorstep, I will rethink this position.
Yeah, we're always open to briefcases full of, and Hollywood should come calling as well, because these would make such good, or in fact, a TV series these days, because that's where the real money is. Yeah. It's crying out for an adaptation, isn't it?
It is. I've I've been told the main drawback is making a convincing monkey on a livable budget for a TV series. But
right. Okay. Well, fingers crossed. Let's. It has to happen. It has to happen. It's so clearly got the work, the beginnings of a great TV show there. I have another listener question from Jessie Braverman. She says, "What is your working style when writing your books? Do you outline and then write, then outline and write some more? And what are your tips for getting through the dreaded muddy middle?" She currently has this with her debut novel. She's trying to figure out a way through. So are you a big outliner, Gareth?
I'm not a big outliner. If you think of a full outline as a sort of a great big ordnance survey map, my outlines are more like sketch maps on the back of an envelope. So they've kind of got the post office and the local pub and where you want to go, but the countryside in between those points is blank. So
right.
I kind of know where I'm going and a few places I want to stop on the way, but half the fun is finding out how to get from A to B to C to D.
So, Gareth, how do you cope with that muddy middle? It's something we talked about when we talked to the folks from NaNoWriMo, and it's a phrase that you hear a lot of authors using now for that kind of second act, if you like, that middle of the book. Without an outline, is that something you power through? Because that tends to be where a lot of the difficult decisions need to be made, isn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of the point. I usually get a panic attack about 50 to 60,000 words in thinking, oh, crap, I haven't got enough plot left to fill out the rest of the book. So usually I have, but I get that kind of panic. And I do tend to start then outlining 2 or 3 chapters in advance. So I'll know what the next 2 or 3 chapters will be, and then I'll write those and outline the next 2 or 3 with more of a focus on sort of dragging in all the various loose ends and focusing them towards the ending. But at the end of the day, it's just, it's the fear on your shoulder saying, you're going to blow it. You're not going to be able to stick the landing. And you just have to power through, and you just have to think, right, organize your thoughts, think, concentrate on where you're going and just power through.
That's really interesting. So you're kind of putting little seedlings ahead as you're writing. So you'd be in the middle of chapter 11, and for chapter 12, you're putting down a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs of what you think happens next. Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much. I'll just have a Word document with like chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14. And it'll be something like they fight the zombies, or they go to the pub. And then as I get closer, I'll be adding more notes to that chapter, and then I'll write that chapter and outline the next couple. So
fantastic.
Yes, that especially happens if I get to a point where I surprise myself and come up with a turn of events that I wasn't expecting, and so I have to write the next few chapters in note form to sort of play out what I've just thought of. So, well,
that's one of the great joys of writing is you will often halfway through discover A, what your book is really about, and B, as you said with Akak Makak, the character might suddenly take over and demand to be front and center. And does that happen often with you? Do you often find the characters taking over or going off in a direction that you hadn't thought of?
It does, yes, definitely. In the Makak books, the first one starts with journalist Victoria Valois coming to investigate her ex-husband's murder. And as a plot point, I put that the husband had electronically copied his personality so she could interact with him in the first chapter, after which he was never supposed to have been heard of from again. But he kind of stuck around as she took him to his own funeral, and he started becoming quite an interesting character, that he was aware he was just an electronic copy of a dead man. And he survived to the end of the book. And then people kept sending me messages going, oh, I love that character. I just want to give him a hug. He's so... and so he was in book 2. And then the relationship between him and Victoria started to develop and become very, very interesting. So he actually survived to the end of the trilogy, which for a guy who's dead before the first book starts isn't bad going.
That's not bad at all. Thank you, Julian and Jessie, for your questions. That's much appreciated. One of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you, Gareth, is you are the model of what I think is a 21st century author. You do social media really, really well. You have a newsletter. You are hugely generous online with ideas. You're very often online saying, anyone stuck this evening? Anyone want to talk? Anyone want to talk through a writing problem? Which I think is just incredible. You also have a Patreon. You have a Ko-fi. How much of your day is taken up with that side of things, and what for you is the most important element of all that for you?
Well, way too much of my day is taken up doing that sort of thing, and I need to be a bit sterner with myself sometimes. You find you've just been looking at Twitter for an hour, and you think, I have to slap my wrist and get on with things. And I think it was back around about the time of the Brexit vote last year.
Right.
I think. And everything online was just so horrible on Twitter. Everyone was shouting at each other. Everything was really divisive and negative. And I was getting a bit stressed out. And I just thought, I want to put something positive out into the world. And so I just started asking people if they needed help. Right. If they needed a character name or if they were stuck on a plot or something, and just started doing that, and it just took off. And by putting that kind of positivity just out into the world, I've got so much back in return. It's been incredible. I've had huge new numbers of followers, and just lots of people really wishing me well as well in my writing career in return. So it's been brilliant in that point of view, and I enjoy. I enjoy helping people out. I do the occasional lecture or workshop at various universities and stuff for students, which is very rewarding. But doing it online as well, is a lot of fun. Yeah, and it's just making Twitter a nicer place.
Yes. Yeah, we need more of that, believe me. This is a very lonely profession. Writers can spend all day on their own. Twitter is kind of a siren call. But like you say, I think, if you measure out and you put something out there that is positive, you generally get positive stuff back. You've also got a very good Patreon page. Talk about that. How long have you been working on that? Because it's something we do here. We have our own Patreon page, and we offer people extras. Your ones, you offer mentorship. It seems to be a model of what authors can offer to their readers. So, can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, again, I think I've been running that for about a year or so. I had some friends who were doing it. I was very kind of. I wasn't sure whether to get involved or not, because I've got that horrible British thing of you never talk about money, and it's very kind of vulgar to talk about money, all that kind of stuff. But I thought I'd give it a try. And to begin with, I had no idea what to offer. In return, gradually I've kind of got into the swing of offering sort of deleted scenes and sort of special heads up and stuff. And now I offer for people who subscribe to the $5 or over, they get a chapter of a exclusive work of fiction that they get a chapter every month of that. And there's, as you say, people can sign up for, I think, $20 a month. And in return for that, I'll edit and critique 1,000 words of fiction for them every month and kind of comment on it and help guide them. So it seems to be working very well. I could do with a lot more followers because I'm the very model of the penniless artist at the moment, but it's helping people, and there's a bit of a community growing because people are chatting on there as well a bit now. So I'm bringing people together, which is nice as well, from all different corners of fandom who are kind of come together on my Patreon page and started talking to each other. So from that point of view, I'm really enjoying it. I've got the huge imposter syndrome that I don't understand why anybody would give me money, and I feel quite embarrassed about it. But at the same time, back in the 60s, you could pay your rent and live quite well by selling one short story a month. Nowadays, that's just impossible. The whole kind of economics of making a living as a writer have changed beyond all recognition. So if people want to support the work I'm doing, if they like it, want to support it, I want to give them value for money in return.
Yes.
And that's what I try to do.
Yes. I got to say, the mentorship one where you critique up to 1,000 words of, that person's work per month, that's a bloody bargain. That's as someone who's paid for freelance editors myself, that is that is very, very cheap. So go check it out. And you were saying that you're writing a chapter of exclusive fiction. So it's kind of it's essentially a serialized piece of work that you're offering exclusive to Patreon people. Would you ever publish that as a short story or a novel or a novella? What's the where are you going with that? What's the end game of something like that?
At the moment, it's purely for Patreon, purely for my Patreon subscribers, and it's a bit different from my usual fare. So I'm not sure if I ever would bring it out. I'll have to see when it's finished if it's it all ties up nicely.
And is this? Are you having fun writing this? That's the important thing.
Writing's always fun. Obviously, except for the days, your eyeballs are bleeding and you're head on the keyboard. But even that is, the best day of writing is the worst day of writing is better than the best day of doing anything else. So,
amen to that. And you're also on Ko-fi or Coffee, which is ko-fi.com. Now, whereas Patreon is more of a subscription thing, people pay a certain amount each month. Am I right in thinking that Ko-fi or Coffee or however it's pronounced, is this more of a one-off thing? How do you make that work?
Yeah, I haven't really done much with it. I've just sort of set it up. But I think the conceit of the site is that you're buying a coffee for somebody. So it's just a one-off. You click a button and it says, buy this person how many coffees? And you 1, 2, 3 or 4. And each coffee is priced at like $3 or something. So it's just a quick way for someone just to drop a tip to you or something. So that's I've had like 2 or 3 come through, and it's just small amounts. But I can see if maybe there was if you've got a large amount of followers and sort of using it, that could be quite useful. And it's nice for people who just want to do a one-off rather than sign up on Patreon.
Yes,
because I know things are tough all over at the moment. So
yes, cool.
It's good. I'm not really seeing much action on that at the moment, but the Patreon seems to be where it's at.
Yeah, definitely. It's and are you getting much engagement on Facebook? Because of course, recently on Facebook they've changed their algorithms. It's very difficult to get any kind of engagement, and certainly after the Cambridge Analytica thing, you hear of people leaving Facebook. Are you working much on Facebook now, or are you drifting away from it?
I'm drifting away from it, to be honest. I had a Facebook. I still got a Facebook page, but nobody really gets to see it because of their algorithms. I think only 1 in a million people seem to see it, unless you want to pay to promote the posts, which I think is their business model. I've got my personal Facebook thing, but I only really use that to sort of keep in touch with school friends, really, and people in the village. There's a chat group for our local village where people all moan about parking in Binder.
We have one of those too. It's brilliant.
Whose car's parked outside number 43? So I only really use it for that. I've actually deleted the app off my phone because it was taking up a lot of room on my phone, and I've deleted an awful lot of personal information out of Facebook just because I'm getting annoyed with it. And so I would say I'm gradually drifting away. I just go in there and update once in a blue moon.
Yeah,
but I think it's definitely feeling like the last days of ancient Rome on Facebook at the moment.
Well, it's interesting because, like you, I'd be interested in experimenting with deleting the app because that thing sucks up data like a vacuum. If you've got a limited data plan, the Facebook app is always the top of the thing that gobbles up. But I mean, I've got family all over the world. I use it it's mainly for photos of the kids and stuff like that. So it's interesting. I wonder if it's become too useful to do away with completely. But again, I think people have sussed out that unless you're Mark Dawson and spending £250,000 on Facebook advertising every month, you're not really going to make any impact on your book sales, so why bother? Why not get onto Patreon or as you're doing, with your newsletters as well? Again, you have a monthly newsletter, which I subscribe to, and it's terrific. It's very, very useful. You are out there making yourself useful, and that to me seems to be the key for good engagement with your readers. Has that been the case with you?
Absolutely. I mean, back in the day, Facebook used to be good. You could have a Facebook author page and you would have an audience and you could talk directly to them. But now it doesn't work like that anymore. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot. So having an email newsletter, I think I've got just over 250 subscribers at the moment, but I can talk directly to them. And, even if they delete the email when it comes in each month, I don't know why they'd signed up if they do that, but even if they do, it's still there. And a tweet is great, but then it's gone. It's like throwing a stone in a river. A tweet. Some people will see it, but unless you aggressively retweet it like every hour, a lot of people will miss it. Yes. But an email newsletter, it's there. It's personal. I get to talk to people. And hopefully offer not just me, but, I try to recommend books and recommend music or give a tip here or there or whatever, as well as just an update on what I'm up to and what I'm doing. So I find it quite useful. I've subscribed to some other authors' newsletters as well. And I find them very useful because it's very much a self-selected audience. And you can get a level of detail and intimacy that you don't necessarily get with social media. So, I'm very pleased with how it's going. And obviously, I'd like 1 million subscribers. So if anyone wants to sign up, they can do it through my website.
Excellent. And where is that, Gareth?
It's www.garethlpowell.com.
Excellent stuff. And of course you do giveaways as well. Has that helped? And I was lucky enough to win a copy of the Macaque Attack trilogy on one of your giveaways, in fact, yes. Which was terrific. Do you find those are useful for building the newsletter, building the numbers? Yeah, they seem. I was surprised that sort of giving away prizes didn't seem to increase the subscriptions as much as I had maybe thought, and they continue to kind of trickle in a sort of organic way. So yeah, that's interesting. I continue to do them when I've got stuff worth giving away. I'll continue to do them, but it's to date I haven't really noticed a huge influx of people just coming in just to win something. Right. Okay, that's interesting. Now you've got. I've seen you've got a new book coming out, non-fiction, about writing, which you describe as a field guide for fledgling writers. That's coming in 2019. How's that coming about for you? And what sort of what will be in the book?
Right. Well, the book, it's had a bit of a weird gestation. I actually wrote it by accident. What I did one day, I trawled back through my website, through my blog, picking together lots of old articles that I'd written about writing and about the struggles I'd had writing and things I discovered writing and so on, and just put them all into a Word file. And that came to about 30,000 words. And I just tweeted, blimey, I think I've just written a book. I think I've just written a book about writing as a joke. And then a couple of hours later, Luna Press got in touch with me and said, we'll publish it. So I thought, blimey, I've accidentally written a book. So I've gone through and I've updated it and I've taken out bits and bobs. I've added in new bits and so on. So what it really is it's a kind of short chapters, sort of blog post length, about all the things they don't really teach you in creative writing classes.
Okay.
So, or at least didn't teach me when I was in a creative writing class. And a lot of stuff is stuff I found out the hard way by having to do it or get it wrong and be put right. That maybe I can save people time they can read it and they can get the information that way. And I think hopefully it's quite entertaining as well.
Good stuff. Really, really looking forward to that. Well, Gareth, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us tonight. I know you are very busy. We're looking forward to whatever comes next. So what's next fiction-wise for you?
February next year is Fleet of Knives, which is the second Embers of War book.
Fantastic.
And February 2020 is Light of Impossible Stars, which is the third and final one. So
brilliant. You do every now and then you do sort of tweet a sort of coming soon thing of a timeline of books to come. So do check that out, folks. If you want to find Gareth on Twitter, he is at Gareth L Powell. So do check him out there. I guess you are on Facebook a bit, aren't you? But Twitter is the place to find you, or his newsletter, or his website. Gareth, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book? Quitting the day job? Becoming a best-selling author? Since 2016, we've interviewed and studied the advice of over 500 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 1 billion books. And in the Bestseller Academy, we've incorporated powerful and proven strategies for success, inspiring fiction and non-fiction authors just like you to reach new heights and write their best book ever. Ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, coaching, and the most inspiring and exclusive community of like-minded writers? Well, your bestseller dreams are just a click away. Join us today at bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy.
Well, thank you, Gareth, for speaking to me. It's always fantastic to speak to a writer who is just so generous with the time, generous with their knowledge. Do follow Gareth on Twitter. He's really, really worth. He is at Gareth L Powell, and he does have a really good newsletter as well. Check out his website too, because he knows what he's doing. He's a model author, I think, and it's interesting to hear that someone who does so well on Twitter is losing interest in Facebook too. This seems to be happening more and more. More and more authors that I speak to seem to be not exactly walking away from Facebook, because I think they know that, certainly for me, it's where I keep in touch with, half my family scattered across the world. But in terms of using it for book promotion, the algorithms just make it nigh impossible these days. It's really hard work. So let us know if that's your experience. Get in touch with us. We are on Facebook. We're Bestseller Experiment on Facebook. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at BestsellerXP. We've updated our Pinterest page recently, so do check that out too. I'm on Twitter at Mark Stay, and my website is Mark Stay Right, so do check that out. I have a newsletter too. And please subscribe, rate and review this podcast in iTunes. It means the world to us. And I've given a big shout out to Dave recently. Dave is our editor of the podcast, and he makes us sound absolutely awesome. So that's it from me for this week. And until next time, happy writing.
Are you ready to transform your writing and your life? Join the 200-word challenge today. In just 5 days, learn to develop a lifelong writing habit with over 2 hours of free expert coaching and the encouragement of a vibrant community. This program has already changed the lives of thousands of writers like you. No matter how busy you are, this challenge will show you that with just 200 words a day, you can significantly boost your creativity, productivity, mental health, and confidence, propelling you towards the end. For the first time, receive comprehensive coaching and step-by-step guidance, all for free. Transform your writing habit and start your journey to become the writer you've always aspired to be. What are you waiting for? Sign up for free now at 200wordchallenge.com and make writing a part of your daily life for life.